Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bibliobibli and Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Last time.
So last time, we had to have our first divination lesson since Trelawney got booted. It was actually very good. And a new outdoor-themed classroom built especially for Firenze. Or Firenze. However you pronounce it. I don't know if we ever figured that out.
I don't
No? Okay.
No one...
Friends.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see what the comments say.
We got a little very vague idea of something that Hagrid's doing. We just know that it's not working. Whatever it is, so Hagrid is up to something, and he is getting beat the F up because of it. And he's stubborn enough that he thinks he can still do it, and he tells Frenzy, no, I'm gonna keep trying. I got this.
Yep.
Will he have this? We don't know. And then Umbridge thinks she catches Harry red-handed as she breaks up the DA meeting. But unbeknownst to her, and Fudge, who's waiting in Dumbledore's office, that's not the case. Really, it's Dumbledore who has them.
That's right.
As he once again outwits them, and then out-magics them.
Yes, big time. They didn't even stand a chance.
And disappears with Fawkes in a poof of flames.
Yep.
Not to go into hiding, though. He says he's not going into hiding.
It's got too much to do for that.
So what is he going to do? Find out in the next chapter.
Chapter 28. Snape's Worst Memory. By order of the Ministry of Magic, Dolores Jane Umbridge, High Inquisitor, has replaced Albus Dumbledore as head of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The above is in accordance with Educational Decree No. 28, signed Cornelius Oswald Fudge, Minister for Magic. The notices had gone up all around the school overnight, but they did not explain how every single person within the castle seemed to know that Dumbledore had overcome two Aurors, the High Inquisitor, the Minister for Magic, and his junior assistant to escape. No matter where Harry went within the castle, the sole topic of conversation was Dumbledore's flight, and though some of the details may have gone awry in the retelling, Harry overheard one second-year girl assuring another that Fudge was now lying in St. Mungo's with a pumpkin for a head. It was surprising how accurate the rest of their information was. Everyone knew, for instance, that Harry and Marietta were the only students to have witnessed the scene in Dumbledore's office, and, as Marietta was now in the hospital wing, Harry found himself besieged with requests to give a first-hand account. "Dumbledore will be back before long," Ernie Macmillan confided on the way back to herbology after listening intently to Harry's story. "They couldn't keep him away in our second year, they won't be able to this time. The Fat Friar told me." He dropped his voice conspiratorially so that Harry, Ron and Hermione had to lean closer for him to hear him. "That Umbridge tried to break into his office last night after they'd searched the castle and grounds for him. Couldn't get past the gargoyle. The head's office has sealed itself against her." Ernie smirked. "Apparently she had a right little tantrum." "Oh, I expect she really fancied herself sitting up there in the head's office," said Hermione viciously, as they walked up the stone steps into the entrance hall. "Lording it over all the other teachers. That stupid, puffed-up, crazy old—" "Now do you really want to finish that sentence, Granger?" Draco Malfoy had slid out from behind the door, followed by Crabbe and Goyle. His pale, pointed face was alight with malice. "Afraid I'm going to have to dock a few points from Gryffindor and Hufflepuff," he drawled. "You can't take points from fellow prefects, Malfoy," said Ernie at once. "I know prefects can't dock points from each other," sneered Malfoy. Crabbe and Goyle sniggered. "But members of the Inquisitorial Squad—" "The what?" said Hermione sharply. "The Inquisitorial Squad, Granger," said Malfoy, pointing toward a tiny silver eye on his robes just beneath his prefect's badge. "A select group of students who are supportive of the Ministry of Magic hand-picked by Professor Umbridge. Anyway, members of the Inquisitorial Squad do have the power to dock points. So, Granger, I'll have 5 points from you for being rude about our headmistress. Macmillan, 5 points for contradicting me. 5 because I don't like you, Potter. Weasley, your shirt's untucked, so I'll have another 5 for that. Oh yeah, I forgot. You're a mudblood, Granger, so 10 off for that. Ron pulled out his wand, but Hermione pushed it away, whispering, "Don't!" "Wise move, Granger," breathed Malfoy. "New head, new times. Now be good now, Potty, Weasel King." Laughing heartily, he strode away with Crabbe and Goyle. "He was bluffing," said Ernie, looking appalled. "He can't be allowed to dock points. That'd be ridiculous. It would completely undermine the prefect system." But Harry, Ron and Hermione had turned automatically toward the giant hourglasses set in niches along the wall behind them, which recorded the house points. Gryffindor and Ravenclaw had been neck and neck in the lead that morning. Even as they watched, stones flew upward, reducing the amounts in the lower bulbs. In fact, the only glass that seemed unchanged was the emerald-filled one of Slytherin. "Noticed, have you?" said Fred's voice. He and George had just come down the marble staircase and joined Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Ernie in front of the hourglass. "Malfoy just docked us all 50 points!" said Harry furiously, as they watched several more stones fly up forward from the Gryffindor hourglass. "Yeah, Montague tried to do us during break," said George. "What do you mean, tried?" said Ron quickly. "He never managed to get all the words out," said Fred, "due to the fact that we forced him head first into that vanishing cabinet on the first floor." Hermione looked shocked. "But you'll get into trouble." "Not until Montague reappears, and that could take weeks. I don't know where we sent him," said Fred coolly. "Anyway, we decided we don't care about getting into trouble any more." "Have you ever?" asked Hermione. "Course we have," said George. "Never been expelled, have we?" "We've always known where to draw the line," said Fred. "We might have put a toe across it occasionally," said George. "But we've always stopped short of causing real mayhem," said Fred. "But now?" said Ron tentatively. "Well, now," said George. "What with Dumbledore gone," said Fred. "We reckon a bit of mayhem," said George, "is exactly what our new head deserves," said Fred. "You mustn't," whispered Hermione. "You really mustn't. She'd love a reason to expel you." "You don't get it, Hermione, do you?" said Fred, smiling at her. "We don't care about staying any more. We'd walk out right now if we weren't determined to do our bit for Dumbledore first. So, anyway," he checked his watch, "Phase 1 is about to begin. I'd get in the Great Hall for lunch if I were you. That way the teachers will see you can't have had anything to do with it." "Anything to do with what?" said Hermione anxiously. "You'll see," said George. "Run along now." Fred and George turned away and disappeared into the swelling crowd descending the stairs toward lunch. Looking highly disconcerted, Ernie muttered something about unfinished Transfiguration homework and scurried away. "I think we should get out of here, you know," said Hermione nervously. "Just in case." "Yeah, all right," said Ron, and the three of them moved toward the doors in the Great Hall. But Harry barely glimpsed the day's ceiling of scudding white clouds when somebody tapped him on the shoulder and, turning, he found himself nose to nose with Filch, the caretaker. He took several hasty steps backward. Filch was best viewed at a distance. "The headmistress would like to see you, Potter," he leered. "I didn't do it," said Harry stupidly, thinking of whatever Fred and George were planning. Filch's jowls wobbled with silent laughter. "Guilty conscience, eh?" he wheezed. "Follow me." Harry glanced back at Ron and Hermione, who were both looking worried. He shrugged and followed Filch back into the entrance hall, against the tide of hungry students. Filch seemed to be in an extremely good mood. He hummed creakily under his breath as they climbed the marble staircase. As they reached the first landing, he said, "Things are changing round here, Potter." "I've noticed," said Harry coldly. "Yes. I've been telling Dumbledore for years that he's too soft with you all," said Filch, chuckling nastily. "You filthy little beasts would have never dropped stink pellets if you'd known I had it within my power to whip you raw, now would you? Nobody would have ever thought of throwing fanged frisbees down corridors if I could have strung you up by the ankles in my office, would they? But when Educational Decree number 29 comes in, Potter, I'll be allowed to do them things. And she's asked the minister to sign an order for the expulsion of Peeves. Things are going to be very different round here with her in charge." Umbridge had obviously gone to some lengths to get Filch on her side, Harry thought, and the worst of it was that he probably would prove an important weapon. His knowledge of the school's secret passageways and hiding places was probably second only to that of the Weasley twins. "Here we are," he said, leering down at Harry as he rapped 3 times on Professor Umbridge's door and pushed it open. "The Potter boy to see you, ma'am." Umbridge's office, so familiar to Harry from his many detentions, was the same as usual except for the large wooden block lying across the front of her desk on which golden letters spelled the words Head Mistress. Also his firebolt and Fred and George's clean sweeps, which he saw with a pang, were chained and padlocked to a stout iron peg on the wall behind the desk. Umbridge was sitting behind the desk, busily scribbling on some of her pink parchment, but she looked up and smiled widely at their entrance. "Thank you, Argus," she said sweetly. "Not at all, ma'am, not at all," said Filch, bowing as low as his rheumatism would permit and exiting backwards. "Sit," said Umbridge curtly, pointing toward a chair. Harry sat. She continued to scribble for a few moments. He watched some of the foul kittens gambolling around the plates over her head, wondering what fresh horror she had in store for him. "Well now," she said finally, setting down her quill and looking like a toad about to swallow a particularly juicy fly. "What would you like to drink?" "What?" said Harry, quite sure he'd misheard her. "To drink, Mr. Potter," she said, smiling still more widely. "Tea, coffee, pumpkin juice." As she named each drink, she gave her short wand a wave, and a cup or glass of it appeared on her desk. "Nothing, thank you," said Harry. "I wish you to have a drink with me," she said, her voice becoming dangerously sweet. "Choose one." Fine. Tea, then," said Harry, shrugging. She got up and made quite a performance of adding milk with her back to him. She then bustled round the desk with it, smiling in a sinisterly sweet fashion. "There," she said, handing it to him. "Drink it before it gets cold, won't you? Well now, Mr. Potter, I thought we ought to have a little chat after the distressing events of last night." He said nothing. She settled herself back into her seat and waited. When several long moments had passed in silence, she said gaily, "You're not drinking up!" He raised the cup to his lips and then suddenly, just as suddenly, lowered it. One of the horrible painted kittens behind Umbridge had great round blue eyes just like Mad-Eye Moody's magical one, and it had just occurred to Harry what Mad-Eye Moody would say if he ever heard that Harry had drunk anything offered by a known enemy. "What's the matter?" said Umbridge, who was still watching him. "Do you want sugar?" "No," said Harry. He raised the cup to his lips again and pretended to take a sip, though keeping his mouth tightly closed. Umbridge's smile widened. "Good," she whispered. "Very good. Now then," she leaned forward a little. "Where is Albus Dumbledore?" "No idea," said Harry promptly. Drink up," she said, still smiling. "Now, Mr. Potter, let us not play childish games. I know that you know where he has gone. You and Dumbledore have been in this together from the beginning. Consider your position, Mr. Potter." "I don't know where he is." He pretended to drink again. "Very well," said Umbridge, looking displeased. "In that case, you will kindly tell me the whereabouts of Sirius Black." Harry's stomach turned over, and his hand holding the teacup shook so that it rattled in its saucer. He tilted the cup to his mouth with his lips pressed together so that some of the hot liquid trickled down onto his robes. "I don't know," he said a little too quickly. "Mr. Potter," said Umbridge, "let me remind you that it was I who almost caught the criminal Black in the Gryffindor fire in October. I know perfectly well it was you he was meeting, and if I had any proof, neither of you would be at large today, I promise you. I repeat, Mr. Potter, where is Sirius Black?" "No idea," said Harry loudly. "Haven't got a clue." They stared at each other so long that Harry felt his eyes watering. Then Umbridge stood up. "Very well, Mr. Potter. I will take your word for it this time, but be warned. The might of the Ministry stands behind me. All channels of communication in and out of this castle are being monitored. A Floo network regulator is keeping watch over every fire in Hogwarts, except my own, of course. My inquisitorial squad is opening and reading all owl posts entering and leaving the castle, and Mr. Filch is observing all secret passages in and out of the castle. If I find any evidence of—" Boom! The very floor of the office shook, Umbridge slipped sideways, clutching her desk for support and looking shocked. "What was—" She was gazing toward the door. Harry took the opportunity to empty his almost full cup of tea into the nearest vase of dried flowers. He could hear people running and screaming several floors below. "Back to lunch you get, Mr. Potter!" cried Umbridge, raising her wand and dashing out of the office. Harry gave her a few seconds' start, then hurried after her to see what the source of all the uproar was. It was not difficult to find. One floor down, pandemonium reigned. Someone, and Harry had a very shrewd idea of who, had set off what seemed to be an enormous crate of enchanted fireworks. Dragons comprised entirely of green and gold sparks were soaring up and down the corridors, emitting loud fiery blasts and bangs as they went. Shocking pink Catherine wheels 5 feet in diameter were whizzing lethally through the air like so many flying saucers. Rockets with long tails of brilliant silver stars were ricocheting off the walls. Sparklers were writing swear words in mid-air of their own accord. Firecrackers were exploding like mines everywhere Harry looked, and instead of burning themselves out, fading from sight or fizzing to a halt, these pyrotechnical miracles seemed to be gaining in energy and momentum the longer he watched. Filch and Umbridge were standing, apparently transfixed in horror, halfway down the stairs. As Harry watched, one of the larger Catherine wheels decided that what it needed was more room to manoeuvre. It whirled toward Umbridge and Filch with a sinister "Whee!" They both yelled with fright and ducked, and it soared straight out of the window behind them and off across the grounds. Meanwhile, several of the dragons and a large purple bat that was smoking ominously took advantage of the open door at the end of the corridor to escape toward the second floor. "Hurry, Filch, hurry!" shrieked Umbridge. "They'll be all over the school unless we do something. Stupefy!" A jet of red light shot out of the end of her wand and hit one of the rockets. Instead of freezing in mid-air, it exploded with such force that it blasted a hole in a painting of a soppy-looking witch in the middle of a meadow. She ran for it just in time, reappearing seconds later squashed into the next painting, where a couple of wizards playing cards stood up hastily to make room for them. "Don't stun them, Filch!" shouted Umbridge angrily, for all the world as though it had been his incantation. "Right you are, headmistress," wheezed Filch, who, as a squib, could no more have stunned the fireworks than swallow them. He dashed to a nearby cupboard, pulled out a broom, and began swatting at the fireworks in mid-air. Within seconds the head of the broom was ablaze. Harry had seen enough. Laughing, he ducked down low, ran to a door he knew was concealed behind a tapestry a little way along the corridor, and slipped through it to find Fred and George hiding just behind it, listening to Umbridge and Filch's yells, quaking with suppressed mirth. "Impressive," said Harry quietly, grinning. "Very impressive. You'll put Dr. Filibuster out of business, no problem." "Cheers," whispered George, wiping tears of laughter from his face. "Oh, I hope she tries vanishing them next. They'll multiply by 10 every time you try." The fireworks continued to burn and to spread all over the school that afternoon. They caused plenty of disruption, particularly the firecrackers. The other teachers didn't seem to mind them very much. "Dear, dear," said Professor McGonagall sardonically, as one of the dragons soared around her classroom, emitting loud bangs and exhaling flame. "Miss Brown, would you mind running down along to the headmistress and informing her that we have an escaped firework in our classroom?" The upshot of it all was that Professor Umbridge spent her first afternoon as headmistress running all over the school answering the summons of the other teachers, none of whom seemed to be able to rid the rooms of the fireworks without her. When the final bell rang and they were all heading back to Gryffindor Tower with their bags, Harry saw, with immense satisfaction, a dishevelled and soot-blackened Umbridge tottering sweaty-faced from Professor Flitwick's classroom. "Thank you so much, Professor," said Professor Flitwick in a squeaky little voice. "I could have got rid of the sparklers myself, of course, but I wasn't sure whether or not I had the authority." Beaming, he closed his classroom door in her snarling face. Fred and George were heroes that night in the Gryffindor common room. Even Hermione fought her way through the excited crowd to congratulate them. "They were wonderful fireworks," she said admiringly. "Thanks," said George, looking both surprised and pleased. "Weasley's Wildfire Whiz-Bangs. Only thing is, we used our whole stock. We're going to have to start from scratch again now." "It was worth it, though," said Fred, who was taking orders from clamouring Gryffindors. "If you want to add your name to the waiting list, Hermione, it's 5 galleons for your basic blaze box and 20 for the deflagration deluxe." Hermione returned to the table where Harry and Ron were sitting staring at their school bags as though hoping their homework would spring out and start doing itself. "Oh, why don't we have a night off?" said Hermione brightly as a silver-tailed Weasley rocket zoomed past the window. "After all, Easter holidays start on Friday. We'll have plenty of time then." "Are you feeling all right?" Ron asked, staring at her in disbelief. "Now that you mention it," said Hermione happily, "do you know, I'm feeling a bit rebellious." Harry could still hear the distant bangs of escaped fireworks when he and Ron went up to bed an hour later, and as he got undressed, a sparkler floated past the tower, still resolutely spelling out the word poo. He got into bed, yawning. With his glasses off, the occasional firework passing the window had become blurred, looking like sparkling clouds, beautiful and mysterious against the black sky. He turned onto his side, wondering how Umbridge was feeling about her first day on Dumbledore's job, and how Fudge would react when he heard that the school had spent most of the day in a state of advanced disruption. Smiling to himself, Harry closed his eyes. The whizzes and bangs of escaped fireworks on the ground seemed to be growing more distant, or perhaps he was just speeding away from them. He had fallen right into the corridor leading to the Department of Mysteries. He was speeding toward the plain back door. "Let it open! Let it open!" It did. He was inside the circular room lined with doors. He crossed it, placed his hand on an identical door, and swung it inward. Now he was in a long rectangular room full of an odd mechanical clicking. There were dancing flecks of lights on the walls, but he did not pause to investigate. He had to go on. There was a door at the far end. It, too, opened at his touch. And now he was in a dimly lit room as high and wide as a church, full of nothing but rows and rows of towering shelves, each laden with small, dusty, spun glass spheres. Now Harry's heart was beating fast with excitement. He knew where to go. He ran forward, but his footsteps made no noise in the enormous deserted room. There was something in this room he wanted very, very much. Something he wanted, or somebody else wanted. His scar was hurting. Bang! Harry awoke instantly, confused and angry. The dark dormitory was full of the sound of laughter. "Cool!" said Seamus, who was silhouetted against the window. "I think one of those Catherine wheels hit a rocket and it's like they mated. Come and see." Harry heard Ron and Dean scramble out of bed for a better look. He lay quite still and silent while the pain in his scar subsided and disappointment washed over him. He felt as though a wonderful treat had been snatched from him at the very last moment. He had got so close that time. Glittering pink and silver winged piglets were now soaring past the windows of Gryffindor Tower. Harry lay and listened to the appreciative whoops of Gryffindors in the dormitories below him. His stomach gave a sickening jolt as he remembered that he had occlumency the following evening. Harry spent the whole of the next day dreading what Snape was going to say if he found out about how much further into the Department of Mysteries Harry had penetrated during his last dream. With a surge of guilt, he realized he'd not practiced occlumency once since their last lesson. There'd been too much going on since Dumbledore had left. He was sure he would not have been able to empty his mind, even if he'd tried. He doubted, however, whether Snape would accept that excuse. He attempted a little last-minute practice during classes that day, but it was no good. Hermione kept asking him what was wrong when he fell silent, trying to rid himself of all thought and emotion, and, after all, the best moment to empty his brain was not while teachers were firing revision questions at the class. Resigned to the worst, he set off for Snape's office after dinner. Halfway across the entrance hall, however, Cho came hurrying up to him. "Over here," said Harry, glad of a reason to postpone his meeting with Snape, and beckoning her across to the corner of the entrance hall where the giant hourglasses stood. Gryffindor's was now almost empty. "Are you okay? Umbridge hasn't been asking you about the DA, has she?" "Oh, no," said Cho hurriedly. "No, it was only... Well, I just wanted to say... Harry, I never dreamed Marietta would tell." "Yeah, well," said Harry moodily. He did feel Cho might have chosen her friends a bit more carefully. It was a small consolation that, last he heard, Marietta was still up in the hospital wing, and Madame Pomfrey had not been able to make the slightest improvement to her pimples. "She's a lovely person, really," said Cho. "She just made a mistake." Harry looked at her incredulously. "A lovely person who made a mistake? She sold us all out, including you." "Well, we all got away, didn't we?" said Cho pleadingly. "You know, her mum works for the ministry. It's really difficult for her." "Ron's dad works for the ministry too," Harry said furiously. "And in case you hadn't noticed, he hasn't got sneak written across his face." "That was a really horrible trick of Hermione Granger's," said Cho fiercely. She should have told us she'd jinxed that list." "I think it was a brilliant idea," said Harry coldly. Cho flushed and her eyes grew brighter. "Oh, yes, I forgot. Of course it was darling Hermione's idea." "Don't start crying again," said Harry warningly. "I wasn't going to," she shouted. "Yeah? Well, good," he said. "I've got enough to cope with at the moment." Fuming, Harry descended the stairs to Snape's dungeon, and though he knew from experience how much easier it would be for Snape to penetrate his mind if he arrived angry and resentful, he succeeded in nothing but thinking of a few more things he should have said to Cho about Marietta before reaching the dungeon door. "You're late, Potter," said Snape coldly as Harry closed the door behind him. Snape was standing with his back to Harry, removing, as usual, certain of his thoughts and placing them carefully in Dumbledore's pensieve. He dropped the last silvery strand in the stone basin and turned to face Harry. "So," he said, "have you been practicing?" "Yes," Harry lied, looking carefully at one of the legs of Snape's desk. "Well, we'll soon find out, won't we?" said Snape smoothly. "Wand out, Potter." Harry moved into his usual position, facing Snape with the desk between them. His heart was pumping fast with anger at Cho and anxiety about how much Snape was about to extract from his mind. "On the count of 3, then," said Snape lazily. 1, 2. Snape's office door banged open and Draco Malfoy sped in. "Professor Snape! Oh, sorry." Malfoy was looking at Snape and Harry in some surprise. "It's all right, Draco," said Snape, lowering his wand. "Potter is here for a little remedial potions." Harry had not seen Malfoy look so gleeful since Umbridge had turned up to inspect Hagrid. "I didn't know," he said, leering at Harry, who knew his face was burning. He would have given a great deal to be able to shout the truth at Malfoy, or even better, to hit him with a good curse. "Well, Draco, what is it?" asked Snape. "It's Professor Umbridge, sir. She needs your help," said Malfoy. "They've phoned Montague, sir. He's turned up jammed inside a toilet on the 4th floor." "How did he get in there?" demanded Snape. "I don't know, sir. He's a bit confused." Very well, very well. Potter," said Snape, "we shall resume this lesson tomorrow evening." He turned and swept from his office. Malfoy mouthed, "Remedial potions," at Harry behind Snape's back before following him. Seething, Harry replaced his wand inside his robes and made to leave the room. At least he had 24 hours in which to practice. He knew he ought to feel grateful for the narrow escape, though it was hard that it came at the expense of Malfoy telling the whole school that he needed remedial potions. He was at the office door when he saw it, a patch of silvery, shivering light dancing on the doorframe. He stopped and stood looking at it, reminded of something. Then he remembered. It was a little like the lights he'd seen in his dream last night, the lights in the second room he'd walked through on his journey through the Department of Mysteries. He turned around. The light was coming from the pensieve sitting on Snape's desk. The silver-white contents were ebbing and swirling within. Snape's thoughts. Things he did not want Harry to see if he broke through Snape's defences accidentally. He gazed at the pensieve, curiosity welling inside him. What was it Snape was so keen to hide from Harry? The silvery light shimmered on the wall. Harry took 2 steps toward the desk, thinking hard. Could it possibly be information about the Department of Mysteries that Snape was determined to keep from him? Harry looked over his shoulder, his heart pumping harder and faster than ever. How long would it take Snape to release Montague from the toilet? Would he come straight back to his office afterwards, or accompany Montague to the hospital wing? Surely the latter. Montague was captain of the Slytherin Quidditch team. Snape would want to make sure he's all right. Harry walked to the remaining few feet to the pensieve and stood over, gazing into its depths. He hesitated, listening, then pulled out his wand again. The office and the corridor beyond were completely silent. He gave the contents of the pensieve a little prod with the end of his wand. The silvery stuff within began to swirl very fast. Harry leaned forward over it and saw that it had become transparent. He was once again looking down into a room as though through a circular window in the ceiling. In fact, unless he was much mistaken, he was looking down into the great hall. His breath was actually fogging the surface of Snape's thoughts. His brain seemed to be in limbo. It would be insane to do the thing he was so tempted to do. He was trembling. Snape could be back at any moment. But Harry thought of Cho's anger, of Malfoy's jeering face, and a reckless daring seized him. He took a great gulp of breath and plunged his face into the surface of Snape's thoughts. At once the floor of the office lurched, tipping Harry head first into the pensieve. He was falling through cold blackness, spinning furiously as he went, and then... He was standing in the middle of the great hall, but the 4 house tables were gone. Instead, there were more than 100 smaller tables, all facing the same way, at each of which sat a student, head bent low, scribbling on a roll of parchment. The only sound was the scratching of quills and the occasional rustle as someone adjusted their parchment. It was clearly exam time. Sunshine was streaming through the high windows on to the bent heads, which shone chestnut and copper and gold in the bright sunlight. Harry looked round carefully. Snape had to be here somewhere. This was his memory. And there he was, at a table right behind Harry. Harry stared. Snape the teenager had a stringy pallid look about him, like a plant kept in the dark. His hair was lank and greasy and was flopping onto the table, his hooked nose barely an inch from the surface of the parchment as he scribbled. Harry moved round behind Snape and read the heading on the examination paper. Defense against the Dark Arts, Ordinary Wizarding Level. So Snape had to be about 15 or 16, around Harry's own age. His hand was flying across the parchment. He'd written at least a foot more than his closest neighbours, and yet his writing was minuscule and cramped. 5 more minutes! The voice made Harry jump. Turning, he saw the top of Professor Flitwick's head moving between the desks a short distance away. Professor Flitwick was walking past a boy with untidy black hair. Very untidy black hair. Harry moved so quickly that, had he been solid, he would have knocked desks flying. Instead, he seemed to glide, dreamlike, across 2 aisles and up a third. The back of the black-haired boy's head drew nearer and nearer. He was straightening up now, putting down his quill, pulling up his parchment toward him as to read what he'd written. Harry stopped in front of the desk and gazed down at his 15-year-old father. Excitement exploded in the pit of his stomach. It was as though he was looking at himself, but with deliberate mistakes. James's eyes were hazel, his nose was slightly longer than Harry's, and there was no scar on his forehead, but they had the same thin face, same mouth, same eyebrows. James's hair stuck up at the back exactly as Harry's did. His hands could have been Harry's, and Harry could tell that, when James stood up, they would have been within an inch of each other in height. James yawned hugely and rumpled up his hair, make it even messier than it had been. Then, with a glance toward Professor Flitwick, he turned in his seat and grinned at a boy sitting 4 seats behind him. With another shock of excitement, Harry saw Sirius give James the thumbs up. Sirius was lounging in his chair at ease, tilting it back on 2 legs. He was very good-looking. His dark hair fell into his eyes with a sort of casual elegance neither James nor Harry's ever could have achieved, and a girl sitting behind him was eyeing him hopefully, though he didn't seem to have noticed. And 2 seats along from this girl, Harry's stomach gave another pleasurable squirm, was Remus Lupin. He looked rather pale and peaky. Was the full moon approaching? And was absorbed in the exam as he reread his answers. He scratched his chin with the long end of his quill, frowning slightly. So that meant Wormtail had to be here somewhere too. And sure enough, Harry spotted him within seconds. A small, mousy-haired boy with a pointed nose. Wormtail looked anxious. He was chewing his fingernails, staring down at his paper, scuffing the ground with his toes. Every now and then he glanced hopefully at his neighbour's paper. Harry stared at Wormtail for a moment, then back at James, who was now doodling on a bit of scrap parchment. He'd drawn a snitch and was now tracing the letters L.E. What did they stand for? "Quills down, please," squeaked Professor Flitwick. "That means you too, Stebbins. Please remain seated while I collect your parchment. Accio!" Over 100 rolls of parchment zoomed into the air and into Professor Flitwick's outstretched hands, knocking him backwards off his feet. Several people laughed. A couple of students at the front desk stood up, took hold of Professor Flitwick beneath the elbows and lifted him to his feet. Thank you, panted Professor Flitwick. "Very well. Everyone, you're free to go." Harry looked down at his father, who'd hastily crossed out the L.E. he'd been embellishing, jumped to his feet, stuffed his quill and the exam paper into his bag, which he slung over his back, and stood waiting for Sirius to join him. Harry stood round and glimpsed Snape a short way away, moving between the tables toward the doors of the entrance hall, still absorbed in his own exam paper. Round-shouldered yet angular, he walked in a twitchy manner that recalled a spider, and his oily hair was jumping about his face. A gang of chattering girls separated Snape from Sirius, James, and Lupin, and by planting himself in their midst, Harry managed to keep Snape in sight while straining his ears to catch the voices of James and his friends. "Do you like question 10, Moony?" asked Sirius as they emerged into the entrance hall. "Loved it," said Lupin briskly. "Give me 5 signs that identify the werewolf. Excellent question." "You think you managed to get all the signs?" said James in tones of mock concern. "I think I did," said Lupin seriously, as they joined the crowd thronging around the front doors, eager to get out in the sunlit grounds. 1, he's sitting in my chair. 2, he's wearing my clothes. 3, his name's Remus Lupin. Wormtail was the only one who didn't laugh. "I got the snout shape, the pupils of the eyes, and the tufted tail," he said anxiously, "but I couldn't think of what else." "How thick are you, Wormtail?" said James impatiently. "You run round with a werewolf once a month." "Keep your voice down," implored Lupin. Harry looked anxiously behind him again. Snape remained close by, still buried in his exam questions. But this was Snape's memory, and Harry was sure that if Snape chose to wander off in a different direction once outside the grounds, he, Harry, would not be able to follow James any further. To his intense relief, however, when James and his 3 friends strode off down the lawn toward the lake, Snape followed, still poring over the exam paper and apparently with no fixed idea of where he was going. By keeping a little ahead of him, Harry managed to maintain a close watch on James and the others. "Well, I thought that paper was a piece of cake," he heard Sirius say. "I'll be surprised if I don't get an outstanding on it at least." "Me too," said James. He put his hand in his pocket and took out a struggling golden snitch. "Where'd you get that?" "Nicked it," said James casually. He started playing with the snitch, allowing it to fly as much as a foot away before seizing it again. His reflexes were excellent. Wormtail watched him in awe. They stopped in the shade of the very same beech tree on the edge of the lake where Harry, Ron and Hermione had once spent a Sunday finishing their homework, and threw themselves down on the grass. Harry looked over his shoulder yet again, and saw, to his delight, that Snape had settled himself on the grass in the dense shadow of a clump of bushes. He was as deeply immersed in the OWL paper as ever, which left Harry free to sit down on the grass between the beech and the bushes, and watch the foursome under the tree. The sunlight was dazzling on the smooth surface of the lake, on the bank of which a laughing group of girls who'd just left the great hall were sitting, with their shoes and socks off, cooling their feet in the water. Lupin had pulled out a book and was reading. Sirius stared around at the students milling over the grass, looking rather haughty and bored, but very handsomely so. James was still playing with the snitch, letting it zoom further and further away, almost escaping, but always grabbed at the very last second. Wormtail was watching him with his mouth open. Every time James made a particularly difficult catch, Wormtail gasped and applauded. After 5 minutes of this, Harry wondered why James didn't tell Wormtail to get a grip on himself, but James seemed to be enjoying the attention. Harry noticed that his father had a habit of rumpling up his hair, as though to keep it from getting too tidy, and he also kept looking over at the girls by the water's edge. "Put that away, will you?" said Sirius finally, as James made a fine catch and Wormtail let out a cheer, "before Wormtail wets himself with excitement." Wormtail turned slightly pink, but James grinned. "If it bothers you," he said, stuffing the snitch back in his pocket. Harry had the distinct impression that Sirius was the only one for whom James would have stopped showing off. "I'm bored," said Sirius. "Wish it was the full moon." "You might," said Lupin darkly from behind his book. "We've still got Transfiguration. If you're bored, you could test me. Here." And he held out his book. But Sirius snorted. "I don't need to look at that rubbish. I know it all." "This'll liven you up, Padfoot," said James quietly. "Look who it is." Sirius's head turned. He became very still, like a dog that scented a rabbit. "Excellent," he said softly. "Snivelous." Harry turned to see what Sirius was looking at. Snape was on his feet again and was stowing the OWL paper in his bag. As he left the shadows of the bushes and set off across the grass, Sirius and James stood up. Lupin and Wormtail remained sitting. Lupin was still staring down at his books, though his eyes were not moving, and a faint frown line had appeared between his eyebrows. Lupin was looking from Sirius and James to Snape with a look of avid anticipation on his face. "All right, Snivellers," said James loudly. Snape reacted so fast it was as though he'd been expecting an attack. He dropped his bag, he plunged his hand inside his robes, and his wand was halfway into the air when James shouted, "Expelliarmus!" Snape's wand flew 12 feet into the air and fell with a little thud in the grass behind him. Sirius let out a bark of laughter. "Impedimenta!" he said, pointing his wand at Snape, who was knocked off his feet halfway through a dive forward toward his own fallen wand. Students all around had turned to watch. Some of them had got to their feet and were edging nearer, some looking apprehensive, others entertained. Snape lay panting on the ground. James and Sirius advanced on him, wands raised, James glancing over his shoulder at the girls at the water's edge as he went. Wormtail was on his feet now, watching hungrily, edging around Lupin to get a clearer view. "How'd the exam go, Snively?" said James. "I was just watching him. His nose was touching the parchment," said Sirius viciously. "There'll be great grease marks all over it. They won't be able to read a word." Several people watching laughed. Snape was clearly unpopular. Wormtail sniggered shrilly. Snape was trying to get up, but the jinx was still operating on him. He was struggling as though bound by invisible ropes. "You wait," he panted, staring up at James with an expression of purest loathing. "You wait." "Wait for what?" said Sirius coolly. "What are you going to do, Snively? Wipe your nose on us?" Snape let out a scream of mixed swear words and hexes, but with his wand 10 feet away, nothing happened. "Wash out your mouth," said James coldly. "Scourgify!" Pink soap bubbles streamed out of Snape's mouth at once. The froth was covering his lips, making him gag, choking him. "Leave him alone!" James and Sirius looked round. James's free hand immediately jumped to his hair. It was one of the girls from the lake. She had thick, dark red hair that fell to her shoulders and startlingly green, almond-shaped eyes. Harry's eyes. Harry's mother. "All right, Evans," said James, and the tone of his voice was suddenly pleasant, deeper, more mature. "Leave him alone," Lily repeated. She was looking at James with every sign of great dislike. "What's he done to you?" "Well," said James, appearing to deliberate on the point, "it's more of the fact that he exists, if you know what I mean." Many of the surrounding students laughed, Sirius and Wormtail included, but Lupin, still apparently intent on his book, didn't, and nor did Lily. "You think you're funny," she said coldly, "but you're just an arrogant, bullying toe-rag, Potter. Leave him alone." "I will if you go out with me, Evans," said James quickly. "Go on, go out with me, and I'll never lay a wand on old Snively again." Behind him, the impediment jinx was wearing off. Snape was beginning to inch toward his fallen wand, spitting out soap suds as he crawled. "I wouldn't go out with you if it were a choice between you and the giant squid," said Lily. "Bad luck, Prongs," said Sirius briskly, and turned back to Snape. "Oi!" But too late. Snape had directed his wand straight at James. There was a flash of light, and a gash appeared on the side of James's face, spattering his robes with blood. James whirled about. A second flash of light later, Snape was hanging upside down in mid-air, his robes falling over his head to reveal skinny, pallid legs and a pair of greying underpants. Many people in the crowd cheered. James, Sirius, and Wormtail roared with laughter. Lily, whose furious expression had twitched for an instant as though she were about to smile, said, "Let him down!" "Certainly," said James, and he jerked his wand upwards. Snape fell into a crumpled heap on the ground. Disentangling himself from his robes, he quickly got to his feet, wand up, but Sirius said, "Petrificus totalis!" and Snape keeled over again, rigid as a board. "Leave him alone!" Lily shouted. She had her own wand out now. James and Sirius eyed it warily. "Oh, Evans, don't make me hex you," said James earnestly. "Take the curse off him, then." James sighed deeply, then turned to Snape and muttered the counter-curse. "There you go," he said as Snape struggled to his feet. "You're lucky Evans was here, Snivelus. I don't need help from filthy little mudbloods like her." Lily blinked. "Fine," she said coolly. "I won't bother in the fuchsia, and I'd wash your pants if I were you, Snivelus." "Apologise to Evans!" James roared at Snape, his wand pointed threateningly at him. "I don't want you to make him apologise," Lily shouted, rounding on James. "You're as bad as he is." "What?" yelped James. "I'd never call you a you-know-what." "Messing up your hair because you think it looks cool to look like you've just come off your broomstick, showing off with that stupid snitch, walking down corridors and hexing anyone who annoys you just because you can. I'm surprised your broomstick can get off the ground with that fat head on it. You make me sick." She turned on her heel and hurried away. "Evans!" James shouted after her. "Hey, Evans!" But she didn't look back. "What is it with her?" said James, trying and failing to look as though this was a throwaway question of no real importance to him. "Reading between the lines, I'd say she thinks you're a bit conceited, mate," said Sirius. "Right," said James, who was looking furious now. "Right!" There was another flash of light, and Snape was once again hanging upside down in mid-air. "Who wants to see me take off Snively's pants?" But whether James really did take off Snape's pants, Harry never found out. A hand had closed tight over his upper arm, closed with a pincer-like grip. Wincing, Harry looked round to see who had hold of him, and saw, with a thrill of horror, a fully grown, adult-sized Snape staring right beside him, white with rage. Having fun? Harry felt himself rising into the air. The summer's day evaporated around him. He was floating upward through icy blackness. Snape's hand still clutched on his upper arm. Then, with a swooping feeling as though he'd been turned head over heels in mid-air, his feet hit the stone floor of Snape's dungeon, and he was standing again beside the pensieve on Snape's desk in the shadowy present-day Potion Master's study. "So," said Snape, gripping Harry's arm so tightly Harry's hand was starting to feel numb. "So, been enjoying yourself, Potter?" No, said Harry, trying to free his arm. It was scary. Snape's lips were shaking, his face was white, his teeth were bared. "Amusing man, your father, wasn't he?" said Snape, shaking Harry so hard that his glasses slipped down his nose. I didn't—" Snape threw Harry from him with all his might. Harry fell hard on the dungeon floor. "You will not tell anyone what you saw," Snape bellowed. "No," said Harry, getting to his feet as far from Snape as he could. "No, of course I will—" "Get out! Get out! I don't ever want to see you in this office ever again!" And as Harry hurtled toward the door, a jar of dead cockroaches exploded over his head. He wrenched the door open and flew along the corridor, stopping only when he'd put 3 floors between himself and Snape. Then he leaned against the wall, panting and rubbing his bruised arm. He had no desire at all to return to Gryffindor Tower so early, nor to tell Ron and Hermione what he'd just seen. What was making Harry feel so horrified and unhappy was not being shouted at or having jars thrown at him. It was that he knew how it felt to be humiliated in the middle of a circle of onlookers, knew exactly how Snape had felt as his father had taunted him, and that judging from what he'd just seen, his father had been every bit as arrogant as Snape had always told him.
So Harry's dad was the Draco Malfoy of his day, it seems.
Yeah.
Oh god, does that make Sirius and Wormtail
Crab and
Goyle?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Probably a little bit smarter.
A lot smarter and equally complicit.
Yes.
Because Sirius was doing hexes right along with him, and
Lupin seemed like he didn't want to do it, but they were like the only people who talked to him as only friends, so he just kind of turned a blind eye to it.
Yeah, he just let it happen.
Yeah.
No, I don't think he liked it. I don't think he thought it was good. You could tell he was watching, and he was just like, "Oh, Jesus."
He was like, if I alienate myself from these people, no one else will understand.
Right.
I won't have any more friends.
I won't have anyone. Yeah. I get Lupin's predicament. But
Yes.
he's also just as complicit by not doing anything.
Agreed. I understand why.
Yeah.
And he didn't have the malicious intent that...
Sirius and James have.
Yes.
And Wormtail is just in so much awe of
I
James.
know. It's like he was in love with James.
Which just makes it all the more awful that he betrayed him in that way.
Maybe he was. Maybe he was in love with him and never really got a hold on his sexuality. And he didn't tell James soon enough, and then him and Harry's mom got together, and he was so heartbroken he just couldn't take it.
So he told Voldemort. I think that's a stretch, but... okay.
That's my theory right there.
Okay.
So I do have one issue. And it's a minor one, but okay, so this is Snape's memory, right? So it's what he remembers.
Right.
So if Harry could go around and look at other people's papers, like the person next to him, Snape must have been cheating if he could see what he wrote. And how did Snape know what James was writing, like 2 seats behind him on his paper? I can understand he may have known where they were in the room just by listening and, picturing it in his mind. But he couldn't have seen their papers. He wouldn't have known what they were writing. Like, how does the pensieve work? Because it's not like his memory. It's taking everything in.
I think that's how it works. I think it's everything that's going on. You can look and see everything else that's going on as long as you're still with that person. But I think you can take in other things. I think it's magic, it's magic, so it stretches that further than just the plain perceptions of what Snape sees.
I know, but I want to know how that works, because it's his memories. So
it's magic, that's how it works.
How would he know what sort of crazy quantum entanglement is happening?
It's magic.
I feel like it should be from his... I don't know, it's just... It doesn't seem to add up.
It's magic.
Because then Harry was saying that if he went away, he wouldn't be able to see it because Snape has to be there to witness it. But he didn't witness any of that other stuff.
But he was in the room.
Yeah, but he didn't witness it.
Right, but that's how the magic works. He's in the room, so as long as he's in the room... And I think within a certain vicinity, Harry can explore whatever is in that vicinity. If Snape had, say, not gone to the grounds and gone someplace else...
but it wouldn't have been in his memory. That's just time travel. That's not exploring his memories. That's just time travel.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, time travel is the time turner stuff.
Yeah, but he's going back in time to someone's memories, and he can explore that area. But it's not his memories.
But it's also not real.
I know. It's his memories.
Right.
But it's not his memories, because Harry can explore outside of his memories.
I think you're taking it way too literally, because it's magic memories. It's your memories, you're putting them in the pensieve.
Yes.
So that adds a magical element to it.
I would have been much more convinced of all this if Harry went around and he looked at the papers and they were blank or something. Because I can totally put together the whole... He knew where everyone was sitting. Maybe he could hear the scratching of the quills and could, distinguish where they were. And that came into his memory. So he could, the room would be filled, but he couldn't see what James was writing. And even when they're outside, he was pressed in and he was just focused on the paper, but he could probably still hear them and, know what they were doing just by the knowledge of what things sound like. But, yeah, I don't know. It's my issue with it.
It's magic. You gotta let it go. It's magic. You gotta just go with it.
It's magic that he can pull the memories out, alright? You gotta have some form of control here.
There is. If Snape had walked away, Harry wouldn't have been able to look at that stuff. That's the control.
Yeah, but then you can't say it's not his memories. It's...
Oh my goodness.
It's my issue with it. Like it or not. We'll move on, because you can't convince me otherwise.
Oh my god.
My big issue with everything.
You're putting too much Muggle science into the idea. That's your problem. Let the Muggle science go. Just let it go.
Well, call it something else. It's not his memories. It's not his memories. It's a memory of the time and situation.
Oh my god.
I said it.
Anyway, as far as what actually happened in the chapter, rather than the technical things about how it happened. Jesus.
I'm just saying. It's confusing.
Maybe you'll understand better when we see more pensive stuff later on.
Or I'm just gonna have more of these.
No, I don't
rants.
think you will. I don't think you will. The more pensive stuff you see, I think maybe you'll understand better.
Okay.
That's it? You got nothing else?
About the pensive, yeah.
Okay, so...
I made my point.
Okay. Inquisitorial Squad.
Yeah, yuck.
Big yuck.
But go Fred and George.
That was great, right?
I know.
That was awesome.
That was perfect.
Umbridge,
we need more of that.
Umbridge deserved that.
I wonder how Umbridge was feeling after that.
Not good. Not good.
No. First day.
Also, she totally tried to slip Harry, like, Veritaserum or something.
Oh, yeah.
She totally just did some illegal shit before all that went down.
She wasn't even trying to hide it. Drink up.
You're not drinking it!
I don't know where Dumbledore is. Go finish it. Go ahead.
Like... Thank God for Mad-Eye Moody. Otherwise, Harry would have just been like, whoa!
Moody's crazy suspicions paying off.
Why
Harry's gonna start drinking from a hip flask.
Why would you drink anything that woman gives you anyway without at least thinking about it for a minute? Like,
especially when she turned her back to you to put in the milk.
Yeah.
Like, no. Let me see. I'll put in all my own stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. She totally tried to give him something.
I would have taken a little sip. This tastes weird. Can you tell me?
I wonder what she gave him.
Veritaserum.
How the hell did she... Well, she probably got it through the Ministry, because I'm like, I really feel like Snape would not give that to her.
No, definitely not, but, I mean, she has connections through the Ministry. Yeah, I'm sure they have someone who can develop it.
Or a stock of it.
Yeah.
Like a controlled stock of it. Yeah, Fred and George are just like, we don't care anymore. We really don't care.
Why not? I mean, everything they're coming up with, they're brilliant. Prodigies. They're geniuses.
They are. They really are. Those fireworks, that's crazy magic. And all they want to do is run the joke shop. They don't need all the educational, the OWLs and all that, the NEWTs and all that stuff. They are dead set on what they're doing, so...
Pound for pound, they might be more intelligent than Hermione.
They're pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
They're pretty brilliant. It's just not recognized by a lot of people because of where they funnel it. But when you take into account all the stuff that they've made and they do, they're pretty damn good wizards. Mm-hmm. Like, they're very skilled.
Even Hermione was stumped with the disappearing hats.
Yeah. And even she was like, those fireworks were awesome.
I know. So Hermione hates Umbridge so much, she's even like... anarchy.
Yeah, I know.
Burn it to the ground.
I thought it was so funny. She's like, I'm feeling rebellious. Oh, dear, Hermione. Goodness.
Fred, George, what have you done? You've tainted this pure soul.
Oh, man.
Well, Umbridge tainted the pure soul, but...
Yeah. But yeah, we got to see... Sirius and everybody be teenagers. He got to see his mom, who was like the only decent person in that whole memory, pretty much.
Yeah.
Everyone else is just laughing their asses off, and she's like, hey, stop. You're being mean. And she hates him, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. The man she has a kid with. Total hate.
He is all about her, though. He's writing her initials on his paper. He's, like, doing that whole thing with the snitch to get her to, like, look at him, and she's just like, ew. Ew. Gross.
Wonder what he finally did to convince her.
Right? How did he win her over?
I don't know. Unless she was just putting up a facade.
I think he annoys her. I think there's definitely a part of her that is just like, oh my god. But maybe there's a part of her like, if you weren't like this, then maybe. You know what I mean? Because she obviously doesn't like that. Maybe she just ends
up hating Snape more. Like, oh, you know what? Snape is a pretty bad dude. You were right. I mean, he did join the Death Eaters, so... I think my theory is, warranted.
So beautiful.
Laying right on the cord.
She's so beautiful. You can lay on the cord if you want to, Pants.
Oh, and Umbridge just letting slip that she has the entire flu network covered, except the one in her office. I'm sure that won't come into play later.
No, definitely not. No. Why would they need that?
No.
Nope. Not at all.
I mean, after that, I would be like, okay, so we're going to talk Sirius through Umbridge's.
I feel like that's definitely a Chekhov's gun type of thing.
Oh, yeah. And then also makes you think, why is hers unwatched? What is she hiding?
Unwatched fireplace means unwatched fireplace. Definitely must be used later.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, come on. You didn't think that whole thing with what they did to him was awful? The soap bubbles, turning him upside down. They were going to take his underwear off. They may have actually done it. Half of the school may have seen his pee-pee.
Oh, they probably did.
That's awful! That's terrible!
It is. But you would think Snape would have some sympathy towards Harry at this point.
How many times do you think that probably happened to him, too? That was like one incident of like, who knows how many times they have done shit to him.
That's true. You think Snape would have noticed how Harry has been treated and realized, he's getting treated a little bit like me. Maybe I should take it a little bit easy on him. Maybe. But no, Snape is just letting his hatred take over and trying to exact his revenge on James on Harry.
Maybe he hates James that much that he just cannot not see James when he looks at Harry. I'm not I'm not excusing it. I'm saying, I think that's what it is, and he just can't get past it.
I agree. But how an adult would handle this situation would be much different. We talk about how Sirius lacks that maturity because he was locked in Azkaban, and he has that kind of to...
Yeah, he does.
Validate his immaturity. Snape does not.
No, he doesn't.
Because it can be fine, I understand. You hate his father. You can never forgive him. But in this situation, you felt like that. It would be one of those things where it's just like, maybe don't be mean to him, but just, ignore him. And try to stay as far away from him as possible. You are the teacher. You are an adult. He is a child. Chill out, bro.
I just think he can't. I just don't think he can. I really just don't think he has it in him. I mean, it'd be great if he did, but I just don't think he's got it in him to be able to do that.
And this is why, what do you say, Harry? That Harry was weak and couldn't control his emotions? Snape doing the same.
Yeah, but Snape doesn't,
Snape can't control his hatred for James to look past the fact that Harry has not even met his father. So he's really not that much of the same person. And while, yes, Harry has gotten caught doing a thing or two here and there, he also has not done anything that James has done to anyone.
Yeah, he's not a bully.
Yeah. He's a little mischievous, but he's not, vicious.
No. He definitely breaks rules and sneaks around and does all of that stuff that we obviously know James and company did, but he doesn't out and out, bully people and stuff. No.
Saying is, obviously, Snape is an adult here. He should act like an adult. And Snape claims that Harry can't control his emotions. How is Snape going to make that claim when he cannot control his emotions from, 14, 15 years ago?
I can't really go any further because there's still more information to yet be revealed about all of this, but this just gives you kind of a taste of why Snape hates him so much. Why he hates Harry. Why he hates Harry so much. That's like a piece of the puzzle, as it were.
Like, I understand that. I understand if you hate Harry. I understand that his father was a big douchebag to him. But I think Snape is acting like a child.
Also, how much do you think Snape hates him now?
Probably a lot.
Like, Harry, you really, really invaded someone's privacy just now. You really, like, overstepped some major boundaries. You should not have done that.
Yeah.
Like, curiosity definitely got the better of you. That was not a good idea. Like, I would be pretty salty, too, if I came back and there was somebody in my private memories that I purposefully did not want that person to see. Like, that's invasive.
That is.
And of all things to see, that is what he saw. That's...
Well, this gives Harry the chance to bond with Snape and maybe put some of it behind them.
Oh, maybe the relationship will improve.
Maybe. Probably not, but maybe.
I mean, he did chuck a jar of cockroaches at his head before he left. Snape's pretty pissed.
Oh, yes, he is.
Right.
He is extremely so.
Rightfully so. I think he has every reason to be as pissed off as he is. Maybe he shouldn't have thrown something at his head. You know, he could have hurt him.
Yeah, I was going to say, that happened. Well, now Umbridge is the mistress, so it probably would have been like, good shot, Snape. Good throw.
Which I think would have just made Snape feel all, ugh, don't compliment me, you toad woman.
Probably.
Snape also knows. He knows. He can't prove it, but he knows that Harry stole from his secret store. Well, Hermione. Harry and company stole from his private stores, that he was out of bounds that one night in the last book when Mad-Eye Moody covered for him. Mm-hmm. And he was in his nightgown and he's like, no, it's Potter, I know he's out! And everyone's like, you're crazy.
I'm surprised Snape hasn't pulled those memories. That would be one of the first things I did if I could go into someone's mind. I mean, if I was called crazy when I knew something happened, like, I need to know for sure. Well, I mean, he will find out that it wasn't Potter who stole anything from his storerooms. But, you know, he'll know he was out that night.
Yeah. I mean, he can't just use the pensive whenever he wants, so I guess that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
He has to borrow Dumbledore's.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Pensieves
Dumbledore...
aren't like a common thing.
Dumbledore doesn't seem like he needs it right now.
Yeah, doesn't seem to be a thing that Dumbledore's really going to need to use.
I think Snape's okay. He can use it as much as he wants for now.
Oh, man. Yeah, I don't know. I don't blame him. If that happened to me, I'd be pretty pissed. Be like, are you serious? I leave the room for 20 minutes to get someone out of a toilet. And what do I come back to? Also, that kid got stuck in a toilet. Like, what? Are all of his bones broken? How is he in there?
I don't think he was that deep in the toilet. Or as you would say, magic.
It could just be magic. Myrtle sits in the U-bend.
Who is...
But
well,
she's
a ghost. Doesn't count. She lacks bones and skin and muscle and anything that makes a human human.
I wonder if Myrtle saw Montague in the toilet. I wonder if someone had to have told her. Come on, she would have loved that, to see him stuck in the toilet. She's probably crying in the bathroom, though. About Olive Hornby.
Probably. I wonder if, what was his name? The guy who was making the exploding toilets.
Willie Wittershins.
Yeah, Willie Wittershins is at it again in Hogwarts.
Well, Fred and George technically did it.
Yeah, that's true.
Which...
I was making a joke.
Jeez, Fred and George. Like, you just shove someone in a cabinet. You don't know what's going to happen to them. That was... What?
In their defense, Umbridge liked that person, so obviously it couldn't have been a good person. So they probably deserved it.
I mean,
I don't know why, but they deserved it.
He's the captain of the Quidditch team. For Slytherin. They cheat all the time, so no, they don't like him.
Oh, that's right, he is the captain.
They probably hate his guts.
So there you go. He deserves it.
And they said he was a member of the Inquisitorial Squad. Malfoy, every situation that he has, every opportunity that he has to be a total douche, he takes it. I'm a member of the Inquisitorial Squad. 50 points from Gryffindor for being a mudblood and a Pratt and a Weasley. Like, screw you, Malfoy. Screw you. He's such a douche. Ugh.
Always. And Harry's dad is about as oblivious as Harry is with women. They share that, too.
Yes.
He's so confused why Lily doesn't like him.
And it's the total opposite end of the spectrum. Like, Harry's so insecure, and James is confident being arrogant, but neither one of them get it.
I know. But I don't think Cho and Harry are going to last.
Yeah, they just got another fight. Things are good, and now they're fighting again.
All because Hermione.
Again, Hermione.
Hermione. Oh, yes, Hermione Granger.
That was really mean of Hermione. I liked the idea. Oh, of course, because it was Hermione's idea. Oh, it was a good idea.
It's a good idea. I mean, pretty good hack. They haven't
pretty
taken off
pretty
yet.
Vindictive of Hermione, too. Kind of a Slytherin thing you did there, Hermione. Just saying. It's kind of a Slytherin thing. You would expect a Slytherin to do that. Hermione's got a little bit of a mean streak in her sometimes. I think she's a little ruthless about things.
She's protective.
She is a little ruthless. There are times when you're like, whoa, Hermione could be dangerous if she was bad. If she was bad, Jesus.
Yeah. If she was a Slytherin, it'd be a whole nother story.
She doesn't have to be a Slytherin to be bad. Jeez.
Obviously. But I don't think it was that bad. It's just like, you signed the contract. That's breaking a contract.
Well, Marietta shouldn't have told.
Exactly.
And Harry's right. Ron's dad's in the Ministry. He didn't tell. I'm sure there were probably other people whose parents worked for the Ministry that were there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Susan Bones, I think. Isn't she there? Susan Bones. Her aunt is Madam Bones. Like, she didn't snitch.
Exactly.
Of course.
Don't be a rat. The last time someone was a rat, they lost a hand.
A finger. No, they
lost
didn't. Lost a hand, too.
From this chapter.
I also love J.K. Rowling's descriptions of Sirius. Always, like, dog.
A dog reference? Yeah, I noticed that.
A bark of laughter. He looked up like a dog gaining on a scent. Like, I love those little things. They're great. I don't know. They make me laugh. He was not a good boy in this chapter, though.
No, he was not.
He was very naughty.
He was the bad boy of the school back in the day, it seems.
And all the girls really wanted him because apparently he was just so good looking.
So suave.
Effortlessly handsome. And then you have James purposely, like, with his hair. I want to look like I just got off my broom. Like... I'm sorry. Ugh. Also, I'm just saying, for the record, when they describe Snape, like, this close to his paper, writing really tiny, like, I did that when I took tests. That's how I did it. I was like this. And my handwriting was really tiny, and I always wrote like this much.
Oh, see, I was one of those people who wrote really big, so it looked like a lot.
No,
I was in heaven when I found out that you could search things in Word. And I searched up, like, your punctuations, and I changed the size, like, 2 more points on all the punctuations, because they won't notice at all. But it increases the length of your essay by, like, 4 or 5 lines. Little tip for you.
So you're serious, James and
Yes,
Lupin.
exactly.
Yeah, I was not. I was literally like, I need to write as small as I can to fit as much on this little bit of paper that I have available to me, and hopefully I can get it all on there, and if I can't get it all on there, I'm going to ask for another sheet of paper, and if I'm not allowed to have another sheet of paper, I won't be able to finish my thing. So, like, and I always had my face, like, I was like this. So I relate to that.
Okay.
And then I spent 20 minutes afterwards going over everything, like, oh, did I do that? You know. So, Snape, I get you.
So, next chapter.
Next chapter is called Careers Advice.
Oh, maybe we'll finally find out what else you can be other than an Auror after Hogwarts.
And a professor.
And a professor. Or starting up your own joke shop. I think there were a couple other jobs mentioned, but it wasn't a lot.
Yeah, the only things you've really seen so far are Hogwarts teacher or
Working for the ministry.
work at the ministry or own your own business.
Mm-hmm.
There's really not... Yeah, I really haven't seen very much.
Or no, you could be, you could work with dragons.
Yeah,
You could work at a bank. That's it.
That's all we know. You can make wands.
Yeah, but you said that's a very skilled, like, that's like a 1 in a million type person.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's not like...
You could apprentice to try and be a wand maker, but probably won't make it.
That's yeah, very skilled art. That's like being a movie star. It's not like being an accountant where you just go to school for a couple of years and you have your degree and you can find a job somewhere.
Being a wand maker is like the deepest deep magic I think there is. It's complicated and...
That's what I mean. So maybe that's not like being an actor. That's more like being I don't know, astrophysicist or something. But not like any astrophysicist. That's like Einstein level.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's a good...
Quantum physicist. There you go. Like super in
Or,
depth.
you know, Leonardo da Vinci is a good one. I think Leonardo da Vinci is a good one.
I don't know. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci was a very intelligent man, but he was more of a jack of all trades than a master of one.
His artwork is considered some of the most pinnacle, perfect pieces of artwork ever created.
So he's a very good jack of all trades.
The Vitruvian Man is considered the most anatomically correct drawing of a human being ever made. And then the Mona Lisa has like 46 layers of glaze over it. Or maybe...
I wonder how mad he was when he realized that he forgot the eyebrows.
Ha 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 ha. It's so weird that was like what was in fashion, is like no eyebrows, and they would like have their hair removed like up to here so it looked like their foreheads are really big. I'm saying it's like those super thick eyebrows that all those Instagram people have now, the super thick drawn on eyebrows. Well, back in the 1500s they didn't want you to have any.
Just wait until we're like 90 years old. We're going to be looking back and grandkids are going to be looking at like old photos from our time and all the hipsters and everything. Like we look back at 80s.
And they're going to... Well, the thing is, they're going to be like...
Like, why would you dress like that? Oh.
What is with man buns? And we'll have to be like, we didn't understand it either at the time. I don't know.
I wonder what the style will be then. Maybe it'll just be completely bald, no hair at all.
Everything recycles itself, so every fashion.
So maybe then will be when you shouldn't have any eyebrows. It'll be Mona Lisa style.
It could. We might get back to that. Everything repeats. All fashion is like a repeating cycle of like a new take on an old thing and a new take on the old thing, and it just comes back for it. Just is what happens. Anyway, we got way off topic.
Yes, we did.
So, Please like, subscribe, and comment. I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments on this one, as Snape is always drumming up loads of conversation, as he should, being the best character in the whole series. So please join us next time for Chapter 29, Careers Advice.